I think I'm live. Yes, I am live. Okay, cool. Let me get live on Instagram. All right. Oh, it's going to be judgment today. It's going to be judgment today. So if you're here live, watching me live, give me a shout out in the comments. Let me know you're here. And definitely give me your comments as the live stream goes, because I'm going to put them on the screen at the end. It's going to be judgment today. Did everybody hear me say that? It's going to be judgment today. Did everybody hear me say that? Okay. Just want to be sure everybody heard me say it. It's 1 minute to 10 o'clock. I'm going to start right at 10 because I'll start on time. It's my magic clock that shows up in every shot. Okay. There we go, 10 o'clock. And we're going to get started. What we're going to talk about today is gatekeeping. What we're going to talk about today is gatekeeping. I know there's some noise in the background, but that'll be over in a few minutes, okay? Just my washer going, okay? Don't forget to give me a shout out if you're in the comments. So what we're going to talk about today is gatekeeping. Now, I got a tweet this week where somebody said to me, look who made themselves the gatekeeper. And look at who thinks they can tell me. And if you try and tell me I'm not a fan of comic books, I will smack you down, is what they had the nerve to say to me. So why do crazy, angry people follow you around on Twitter? Why? I don't understand. If you vex them so, why do they follow you? If they just get so angry and so upset and so flustered by reading your content, why do they follow you? I don't understand that. I don't follow nobody where I don't want to hear what they have to say. That's the beauty of social media, being able to control what's in your timeline. So I don't understand why crazy, angry people follow you around on Twitter, but he's just going all off, and how dare you tell me I'm not a fan, and I will smack you down, and and look who made himself a gatekeeper and all that. Okay, so let's look at that tweet, but there's another tweet I want to look at first. So this tweet, let me put it on the screen. This tweet is from Nilly. Okay, you should see it on the screen now. Move that out the way. Make that a little bit bigger, so hopefully you can see that better. This tweet's from Nilly. They say, like, you can't call yourself a comic book fan simply because you enjoy media based on it. You're a superhero fan, a fan of comic book movies or comic book media. I see your popcorn farts. That's where I'm going. What you just said, that's where I'm going with this whole thing. A fan of superhero adaptations or something in between, not a comic book fan. I mean, I think that's kind of plain as day. If you like football players, but you don't watch football, you are not a fan of football. You're a fan of football players. I don't know what's so difficult about that concept. So like Millie's saying here, you can't call yourself a comic book fan simply because you enjoy media based on it. You're a superhero fan, a fan of comic book media, a fan of superhero adaptations or something in between, not a comic book fan. Which just makes all the sense in the world. I don't understand why that's an issue. So let me show you what I said that drew the ire of a lot of people. The question was from Bradley Osborne. Let's end this debate here today. Does someone actually have to read comic books in order to call themselves a comic fan? This was my response. I said, yes, they do. There's no other area in life where someone calls themselves a fan of anything, yet don't consume any of the content. Now, is that rocket science? Is that just me, or is that plain as day? Okay, there's no other area where you might call yourself a fan of something, anything, but you don't consume any of the content. How are you a fan of baseball if you don't watch baseball games? How? How are you a fan of the Olympics? How are you a fan of ice skating if you don't watch ice skating? How? So then I went on to say in my tweet, the problem is the nomenclature. Many people are fans of comic book based media, which is just what Nilly said, meaning animation, TV shows, live action films, video games, RPGs, etc. So they are enjoying that, and it's based on the IP from comic books. So I showed you Nilly's tweet to show you I'm not the only one saying that, because it's common sense. It's not this big leap, okay? So you're a fan of comic book based media. The intellectual property comes from comic books, but that's not what you're consuming. You're consuming media based off the comic books. So some are actually a fan of comic book based media, not of comic books themselves. You're not a fan if you don't consume the content anywhere else in life. Again, that seems like such a straightforward principle to me. I don't understand why it's controversial in any way. There's nothing wrong with any level in the spectrum, from being a casual enjoyer to a comic creator or historian. Again, it's a spectrum, it's a range. It is not just a place of extremes. So you can be the kind of person that just enjoys the movies, or you just enjoy TV shows, or you're a real big fan of animation, or it's not really a part of your life, but if you see what you think might be a fun movie, you'll take the kids to see it because, hey, it's Superman, or hey, it's Supergirl, something like that, all the way down to people that actually create comics content, both professionally and on an amateur level. And then people that are comic historians that actually study the history of comic books, study how they developed, study where they come from. Like knowing, for example, that Superman was not the first comic book superhero. The first person that appeared with enhanced powers actually appeared in 1900 or 1901, I forget which, in a comic strip. And the tropes that we like, the secret identity and the changing the costume and all that, actually came from a French play written by a woman with her husband. All that predates Superman. So if you actually have studied that, you know that Superman is nowhere near the first individual to, that's who I was trying to think of, Hugo Hercules. Hugo Hercules appeared in 1902. And he appeared in a comic strip, and he had super strength. Let me pull that up so you can see it. Oh, let me get a big picture. Wow, these pictures are so small. Okay, here we go. Hugo Hercules was the first person to appear in a comic strip with enhanced abilities. He had super strength. That's 1902. See that, Sunday Tribune? 1902, way before Superman. Can you see it? So if you've actually studied comic books on any level, and you understand that all the tropes that we love kind of came together with Superman, but they weren't originated by Superman. The tropes that we love, meaning the bumbling civilian persona, designed and created to hide the masked, powerful persona, that actually comes, I'm trying to pull that picture up too. That actually comes from the Scarlet Pimpernel. Okay, that actually comes from this. Scarlet Pimpernel was written by Baroness Orczy. I don't know if I'm saying the name right, Baroness Orczy, a novel about a mysterious English hero who rescues French aristocrats during the French Revolution. And she covered that with her husband. That's where the trope of bumbling in private, the thing we might think of old school Clark Kent, to throw off people from the scent of who you really are and your masked identity. That's actually where that came from. So first superpowered person in strips was Hugo Hercules, 1902. The tropes that we like came from Scarlet Pimpernel in 1905, written by a woman, English people saving French aristocrats. It all came together in Superman. The dual identity, the flamboyant costume, the shield, the cape, the powers, it all came together in Superman. But it wasn't the first. He wasn't the first to do that. So if you've ever studied comics, you know that. Okay? But if you don't, that's cool. That, you know, so people are projecting when they say you think you're better than others, and how do you know what somebody thinks? That's not what I think. I don't think I'm better than other people. I just think that I've studied some of this stuff so I can get an understanding of how comic books developed and how these tropes developed and where they come from. Batman was created in response to Superman. They had a hit, so they told Bob Kane they wanted another hit. And if you know anything about that, you know the Batman that Bob Kane invented was not the Batman that we know. I'm going to say that one more time. The Batman that Bob Kane actually invented was not the one that we know. Now, a whole lot more people know that now, but you may not have always known that. Okay, so I'm trying to pull up a picture here. I keep finding these pictures that are so tiny. Okay, I'm trying to pull up a picture so I can show you. Lord, see these tiny pictures. Here we go. That is what Batman originally looked like when Bob Kane invented him. He had a Robin mask, he had blonde hair, he had no chest emblem, and he had somewhat of a bat-shaped cape. That is what Batman looked like. This was Bob Kane's Batman, and a whole lot more people know that now. But the Batman that we know was retaped, retooled, invented by Bill Finger. Bill Finger is the one that actually, and there's a whole documentary on it called Batman and Me, I think it is, about Bill Finger. And if you want to read up on it, but Bill Finger is the one that turned Batman into the character that we know. Okay. And so, no, it's Batman and Bill. That's what I'm thinking about. That's what I'm thinking about. So I'm finna pull that up. That right there. Batman and Bill. This is a movie, 2017 movie that talks about what really was happening when Batman was being created and Bill Finger's real contributions and everything that's gone down since then, because fans and the estate of Bill Finger had to fight to even give him name credits, because for years it was Batman created by Bob Kane. For years. And people didn't know that it's actually Bill Finger that made the Batman that we know. Now, some people know that, but so the point I'm trying to make to you is that anywhere you are on this spectrum is cool. What's wrong with that? If you're a casual learner, you're a casual enjoyer, whatever, what's wrong with that? Nothing. But the problem comes in. Let me go back and show you where the problem comes in. Here come the problems. Problems come in. The issue comes in with the lecturing by tourists that have watched 2 movies and a cartoon and now fancy themselves debating experts against people who have read the actual comic books for decades. That's where the problem comes in. That's where the problem comes in every time. There's nothing wrong with being wherever you are on the spectrum in terms of your level of knowledge, your level of enjoyment of comic books and comic book-based media. And whatever you're a fan of, you're a fan of. What's wrong with that? Who's stopping you from doing that? But the problem comes in is when you want to start lecturing people that know more on the subject than you do, and you think because you watch 2 movies and a cartoon that you can have some type of fact-based description of the character, or trying to understand the character's motivations when you don't understand their origins or whatever. That's where the problem comes in, and that happens on Twitter all the time. Let me show you this tweet I just posted. This one. Now, so the original tweet I was responding to, I was quote tweeting, is the one where he said that Hans Zimmer thinks Christian Bale was the best Batman. The Batman I know is Christian's haunted, unresolved, still that kid who saw his parents die. Ben's felt middle-aged and grumpy. My response to that was, I still don't get what movie they were watching. Bale's version powdered for several years after Rachel's death, and that is not how Batman would react. He would, in fact, Batman harder. And Bale, Nolan's Batman, Christian Bale, is not haunted by his parents' death, because that would be the actual Batman. The actual Batman made an unbreakable vow. This one, Bale Bats, retires. Batman would never retire. With the Selena Kyle he just met, and gives his cave to some dude named Robin, not Grayson, some dude named Robin, without any training or vow taking whatsoever. I have maintained from the beginning, Batman Begins is not necessarily a bad film, but Nolan does not understand Batman. He doesn't like where Batman is. And all this grounding didn't do anything but create a character that doesn't exist. Okay? But then, what I said either last night or this morning was, I said, okay, 3 hours ago I said that this morning, just to give some comic book backup to my statements. Bruce Wayne made a tearful vow before God to spend the rest of his life avenging his parents' death. That's why he can't ever get away from it. And there that is. There's his vow. And I swear by the spirit of my parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals. A vow he made before God in prayer position, right there in the comic books. I'm not making that up. Richard Grayson made the exact same vow with, in his words, God and the Batman as my witnesses, right here. That night, with only God and the Batman as my witnesses, I swore an undying oath. Swear that you will fight against crime and corruption and never swerve from the path of justice. Grayson said, I swear it. This is why I keep telling you, not including the vow in live action has always been such a mistake, because it's so much a part of the core of Batman's character. This is why he can't stop being Batman. He swore a vow that covers the rest of his life, warring on all criminals. He said that. Also, for those that are saying that religion is just now being introduced into Batman's mythology, not true. He's on his bed praying to God, swearing a vow. Okay? Grayson, with only God and the Batman as my witnesses. So religion in Batman's mythology is not new. Now, whether or not we want to argue if he's Catholic or Protestant, maybe there's a case to be made there. But I said Batman is no Selena since Batman #1. That's how long Selena Kyle has been around, since Batman #1 from 1940. So they didn't just meet like they did in The Dark Knight Rises. That's a Selena Kyle. He just met her. And he retired with her. Batman's famous line, quiet or Papa Spank, because Selena's always been a thief. She was disguised as an old lady here. And Batman sniffed her out, took off her makeup, and she's still defiant to the end. Because she's Catwoman. She's always been that way. Okay? And finally, I said, Batman wouldn't ever retire. He'd find a way for Bruce Wayne to disappear from public life and spend the rest of his days on Earth deep in the cave, training the next generation of crime fighters, which is exactly what happens at the end of The Dark Knight Returns. He faked his death. Superman heard his heart start beating again, but winked at Carrie. Then Bruce retreated into the cave, training Carrie and the Sons of the Bat to take care of Gotham until the day where they found him actually dead in the cave. He said that was a good enough ending. That's what Batman would do. So just to give you some comic book backup to what I said, okay, that I wasn't just pulling that out of thin air, okay? I wasn't just making that stuff up because I've actually read the comics. I don't think I'm better than other people. I think I have read comic books since I was 4. That is a statement of fact, okay? So what I told you we're going to talk about today is gatekeeping. But I had to give you where all that was coming from because of that tweet that they sent me about how look who made himself a gatekeeper and you don't get to tell me I'm not a fan and all that. Let's look up, shall we, the definition of gatekeeping. Let's look that up. Here it comes. Oh, that's kind of small. These pictures are so small. Gatekeeping, the activity of controlling access to something. The company's culture of gatekeeping has served to narrow the mainstream for entertainment offerings. The action of discouraging or criticizing others' participation in or enjoyment of a shared activity or interest. So this was the word that was weaponized when other groups of people were trying. What's up, Al? I see you on Instagram. Good to see you. When other groups of people were trying to get into comic books on many, many different levels, this was the word they used. Okay, they used gatekeeping. They said, you're such gatekeepers. They said the same thing that guy said to me this week. You don't get to tell me I'm not a real fan and you're such gatekeepers and you're trying to keep everybody out because comic books are supposed to be for everybody. Comic books always were for everybody. Let me ask you a question. See, that's why stupid people don't like me. That's why stupid people get so mad at me because they don't come with facts. They have no answer when I come with facts. Let me ask you a question. In the 60s, there were signs, especially in the South, that said white only, meaning you couldn't eat at that restaurant if it had a white only sign. Black people couldn't eat at that restaurant. White only water fountains, which meant that Black people couldn't drink out the same water fountains as Caucasians. Okay. Definitely graveyards and cemeteries. You couldn't be buried next to white people if you were Black in the 60s, which wasn't that long ago. But there are actual signs that said white only. For those of you that don't know anything about that time, that was, I'm trying to find, okay, here we go. Here we go. So once again, you can see I'm not making it up. Here it is. We cater to white trade only. There were signs on restaurants and water fountains and places that to segregate Black people from white people. Okay. There were signs that said if you are Black, you have to go to a different waiting room. If you are Black, you can't eat in the same restaurant as Caucasians. Do you see that? Do you see I'm not making that up? You may not know that much about America's history, but do you see right here, I'm showing it to you? Do you see that I'm not making that up? Okay. So the white only signs, they say, were roughly from 1877 to the 1960s. So almost, just shy of 100 years of white-only signs in the Jim Crow era to let Black people know that we were not welcome in the same restaurants as Caucasians, that we could not eat there, that they had a separate restroom for us, separate waiting rooms, that we couldn't be buried in the same cemeteries as white people if you don't know anything about American history. Because I'm talking about if you're an American, that's the country you live in now. That was from 1877 to 1960s when that was abolished. But it did happen. It's a legitimate part of our history. You with me so far? Okay. So here's my question. Have you ever seen a sign over a comic book rack that said boys only? Have you ever seen a sign in a comic book shop that said men only? Have you ever seen a sign on a newsstand that said straight people only? Only straight people get to read the comic books. Have you ever seen that? Because again, gatekeeping was what people were accused of back when everybody named Mama was trying to invade the comic space. But there were actually signs that separated African Americans from Caucasians in this country from 1877 to the 1960s, almost 100 years. Signs that said, if you Black, you can't come in here. My question to you was, where are the signs that said boys only for comic books? Where is that? Where are the signs that said, if you're a girl, you can't come in a comic book store? Where is that? Where are the signs? Where did that happen? Where are the signs where that happened? You understand? So the accusation was that there was all this gatekeeping or whatever, and you wouldn't let these people in and you wouldn't let those people in, and blah, de blah, skip it blue. But I'm asking you, where were the signs that said that was true? Where were the signs that said no girls allowed? Where were the signs that said male only? Where were the signs that said straight people only? Where was that? So even though we were accused of gatekeeping, it was just that, an accusation. Now, what is true is that comic books and most superhero, sci-fi, fantasy, and media has been a boy-based type of content, type of IP. Now, I will speak in agreement to that most of the sci-fi and fantasy and comic book-based media has been boy-based, most of it. It has been boy brands in terms of its target demographic. Not girls can't read it, not non-straight people can't read it or have access to it, not that, but that it was primarily a boy-based brand. But why? Why? It's because it's something that more boys would be interested in. Guns and shoot 'em up and lasers and rockets and fights and all that is much more of a male skewing activity. No one seems to question that women seem to be the primary target market for like romance. I've met some romance novel writers. I don't write romance because I wouldn't know what I'm doing, but I've met, I remember at a convention one time, and this woman, she said she made her money ghostwriting romance. She said there's such a huge market for romance until she didn't even have to put her real name on it. She ghostwrote some stuff and made a good living. And I haven't figured out why, for some reason, that it seems to be acceptable to say and acknowledge that what we'll say is the romance genre is primarily more a female skewing genre. I'm trying to pull that up. We'll say that the romance genre, that this type of material is more female skewing. Is that a big leap for me to say that? So somehow we seem to be cool with the idea that there's some content that is primarily aimed at females. Now, nowhere does it say boys can't read this. Where is that? Where does it say in the romance section of any website, any online bookstore, any brick and mortar bookstore? Where does it say, if boys can't read this? Where is that at? So it seems that we understand that you can have a type of IP that is aimed primarily at females because the type of content is something that females would primarily enjoy reading. Not to say that other people can't read it, but it's primarily aimed at heterosexual females. Why is that okay? But then if I say that sci-fi and fantasy and comic book content is aimed primarily at males, heterosexual males, all of a sudden that's the thing. Why? That's why stupid people don't like me, because that's so stupid. That's so stupid, I need a new word for stupid. While you're screaming about equality and fairness, you refuse to acknowledge that there's some stuff that's aimed at women, primarily for women, and it doesn't ever say men can't read it, but it's created because it primarily would appeal to women. But when I say there's some stuff aimed at men, it's created primarily because the nature of it, the nature of those stories would appeal to men. All of a sudden, that's the thing. That's why stupid folk don't like me. Because that argument is so stupid, I need a new word for stupid. It's so stupid. It's not just regular stupid. It's extra stupid. That's extra stupid on how you can acknowledge this, but you can't acknowledge this. You said that this is perfectly fine, but this is somehow oppression and misogyny if it's boy-based. Which leads me to my next point, okay? And that's this right here. The next point is this. And what do we call this, folks? We call this a Trojan horse. Now, a Trojan horse comes from Greek mythology. So whether or not it actually existed or not is debatable. Of course, we can argue about, some things that we know were straight myths. Some things may have had some roots in real life experiences, but that's where it comes from, Greek mythology. What is the idea behind a Trojan horse? The idea behind a Trojan horse is that it's an offering that your enemies are bringing to your gate as kind of a peace offering to try to say, you and I are good. We're good. We're okay. Okay? But inside that Trojan horse is an army of troops that are designed to, once the horse is let into the city, then the soldiers come out of the Trojan horse and begin to attack the city. That is the legend, that is the mythology, that is the idea, that is the concept behind a Trojan horse. Are you with me so far? Would you argue with that definition? Would you say that I am incorrect in defining a Trojan horse in that way? That it's designed to make your enemies relax, is designed to cause you to let this in the gate because it's presented as a guise of a peace offering. Don't be afraid to let us in, is what the Trojan horse says. Don't be afraid to take this gift and let us into your city. Okay, I see some comments saying I'm correct on the Trojan horse. So then we're in agreement then that that's the definition, that's the concept behind this, whether it had roots in real life or not. You with me? Okay. So y'all know where I'm going next, don't you? I know you know, because you know me. What happened once we let them in? Let me make my face big for that. What happened after we listened to people say for years, you're just misogynist and you're just racist and you're just phobic and you're bigots? Because comic books, have been aimed at boys, and comic books are created by primarily straight white men, and that's not right and that's not fair. You ought to let us in your clubhouse because you shouldn't be afraid to let different people in, different voices, different whatever. For years, that was the presentation, right? My question is, what was the net result of letting them in? What was the net result? Y'all know where I'm going. Y'all know where I'm going. Okay? We're going to start right here. We're going to start with Indiana Bones. What was the net result? Net result was propping up a girl boss, saying that all of his adventures that originally belonged to her. At least that was the original ending, because I don't watch this stupid movie. The original ending was that they were going to travel in time and say that she was actually the adventurer that had done Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, that she did it, not Indy. The original ending, I don't know if they did that or not, because I didn't watch this stupid movie. The original ending was that she was going to replace him in time. And she slapped Harrison Ford, and he's old and he's doddering, and she's making fun of him. Okay? Okay, something that was a masculine brand, a truly masculine brand. A brand that was aimed at males, a brand where the main hero was an adventurer, a swashbuckler, something that men would enjoy seeing, something that men would see themselves in. We let them in, and what happened? What happened to Indy as a result of that? I'm just asking a question. What was the net result? Okay. Hey there, Xavier. I see you. Good to see you. Yeah, when you come in, everybody, let me know when you're here live. Give me a shout out. And I'm going to put your comments up on the screen at the end when I get through. So what was the net result? We got a humiliation. We got a girl boss. We got an Indiana Jones movies, Indiana set of movies that were cringe, but this one was the straw. Okay? Next up, what am I going to pull up next? You know where I'm going next. I'm going to Predator. I didn't watch this stupid movie either. Predator was a male skewing brand. How could anybody say with a straight face that that first Predator movie and the Predator franchise was not male skewing? It was about, the first movie was about discovering an alien that had advanced technology, that had a cloaking device that was able to pick people off one by one. Okay. How could you say that first movie with Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura and Bill Duke, how could you say that movie wasn't male? It's going to come down to this, where now Predator is sensitive and worried about their feelings, and he's talking about how they feel. Now he's got a snarky android robot female companion, and it's all about apologizing for being too aggressive. So what has been the net result of letting all those people in? What's been the net result is my question today. Since gatekeeping was so wrong, what's been the net result? You know where I'm going next? You know where I'm going next. I'm going right here. That's right. It's your favorite Jedi, Mary Ray Sue Palpatine. There is no greater girl boss in all of sci-fi and fantasy. There's no greater Mary Sue than this woman right here. Now, once again, if you know anything, if you're a part of the sci-fi and fantasy community, you know where the term Mary Sue comes from. It was invented by a woman. It was in Star Trek for a self-insert character, and she was making fun of herself when she wrote herself into a Star Trek adventure. And things have developed from that. The meaning has grown and expanded, but that's what words do over time. But the original idea of Mary Sue was an insert character, and then it grew to mean everybody loves her, and then it grew to mean she could do no wrong. And now a Mary Sue character includes the idea that she instantly masters all the skills that it took the men or other people decades to learn. So it took them decades to learn it. But a Mary Sue character, she can just pick up a lightsaber and she can do it with someone that's been using the Force for decades, but she's just as good as they are. And she can resist the Jedi mind trick. And Rey could automatically do everything because she's perfect in every way. Her powers, skills, and abilities are maxed out, and she's better than all the men. That's what Mary Sue has come to mean. So what has been the net result of a character like that in Star Wars? What's been the net result of Kathleen Kennedy being in charge of Star Wars? What's been the net result of what was clearly a boy-based brand that everyone loves? Star Wars is one of my favorite examples of how even if a brand is boy-based, everybody can still love it. Because people love Star Wars for 4 decades. People from all over the world, from all generations, from all walks of life. So it's entirely possible to have a male skewing brand that still has mass appeal. That was Star Wars for 40 years. And what happened? As soon as we let this in, what happened to it? That's my question. What happened to it? That's what we're talking about today. Okay. She said that I'm all the Jedi. No true words were spoken because she channeled everybody's power and she's better than anybody and after 5 minutes. Next up, you know where I'm going next. You know what I'm going to talk about next. Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. What happened? I'll never forget. I was trying to find a quote. I didn't have time to find the quote, but I'll never forget the quote that was said about this show. The quote that was said about this show was, "We're telling the story now." And what they meant was not Tolkien, not his original stuff, and not anybody, because originally Lord of the Rings had a liaison from the Tolkien estate to be sure that all of the content that was created was faithful to the source material. Did you know that? They fired that person on Lord of the Rings of the Power, and they said, "We're telling the story now." And what they meant by that was the infusion of a bunch of tropes and characters that had never been a part of Middle Earth or any part of Earth or any part of Tolkien's story. Most of it being, English and white and all that, and rooted in that type of culture and background or whatever. But they said, no. That's not acceptable. So we got to interject all this. The quote was, I couldn't find it, but the quote was, "We're telling the story now." Why would it say we? Who do they mean by we? They meant non-straight white men. And so now is again got girl bosses all over the place. It's got all kind of people that didn't have any type of interest or connection or investment or any type of what they would call representation. That's another stupid word. That's another stupid word. Why is that a stupid word? I told you stupid people don't like me. Representation. I've fallen out with some people on Twitter. I had some people on Twitter that unfollowed me and blocked me because I disagreed with turning white characters black. And they told me, their words to me were, we need as many black characters as we can. So let them turn all the white characters black that they want to. And I was like, I disagree with that. I didn't need Superman to be black to see myself on the screen. I enjoyed Superman for who he is. I didn't need him to be black to enjoy him. But some people feel differently, and I've had people unfollow me and block me on social media for that position. But representation, the reason that's a stupid word, there's nothing wrong with having different kinds of characters. Star Wars always had different kind of characters. Star Wars always had humans, aliens, and droids. Please tell me how that is factually incorrect. Please tell me how there weren't blacks, Asians, Caucasians, women, men, young people, older people, androids, and aliens in Star Wars from the jump. Please tell me how that's wrong. So this idea that we have to introduce diversity and representation is a lie. But representation, meaning the reason that is stupid, and no, I'm not going to take that back, is stupid. You know why it's stupid? Because it's not possible to tell a story that represents every possible combination of person. How? How many people walk this planet? How many different languages do we have on this planet? How many different cultural or ethnic groups and subgroups do we have? Do you think every story you tell can include or represent all of them? How? How? And that's why I say it's stupid, because it is stupid. We need representation in this. How come what you're talking about was popular before you interjected these so-called representation-based characters? If it was so wrong and it was so bad, why was it successful before all of this so-called representation? Riddle me that. Nope. Just no. Okay. All right. Where am I going next? I'm going right here. I'm going to Doctor Who. Doctor Who. This is an article, Doctor Who TV, last year. In recent years, Doctor Who hasn't felt like the show I grew up loving. It's not just nostalgia talking either. It feels like something deeper has shifted, and not in a way that brings people together. These days, fans don't seem to talk as much about the plots or mysteries anymore. Instead, most of the noisier conversations I see around Doctor Who are about controversy, politics, identity, and whether the show is making some kind of statement. Now, with the upcoming series led by Ncuti Gatwa, with new companion Virata Sethu, it's all flared up again before a single episode has even aired. In a recent Radio Times interview, Sethu addressed some of the backlash to show his face, saying, "I just think we're doing the right thing if we're getting comments like that." Gawa added, "We're going to piss off so many people." I couldn't help but sigh at this, because all I could think was, I missed the days when it felt like the marketing and mission of the show was to bring people together. Look at that. So he said, we're going to piss off so many people. Here it is again. Incoming Doctor Who star Virata Sethu, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, is leaning into the complaints that the legendary sci-fi show, how many decades back does Doctor Who go? Is going woke. Okay, Sethu plays Belinda Chandra, the new companion to the 15th Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, who's entering his second season in the role. Okay. Woke just means inclusive, progressive, and that you care about people. No, it doesn't. That is not what woke means. Once again, what woke started out meaning was stay awake to institutionalize racism, if you didn't know that. When that term first started entering into the lexicon, stay woke What that meant was when they have institutionalized, organized, legalized racism to persecute you, to treat you unfairly under the law, to make different rules for you if you were Black. Stay woke, stay awake to that. Don't be fooled by talk of equality if said equality is not practical. Okay? That's what woke originally meant. What woke has come to mean, is replacing male characters with female characters, replacing white characters with Black ones, replacing straight characters with gay ones, replacing people in shape with people that are not in shape, replacing characters that historically been a certain way, replacing them with characters that is as far away from that as possible. That's what woke means now. And gendercide, being sure you get rid, I don't know what they have against gingers, I really don't. But replacing all ginger characters with other ethnicities, with Black characters, with non-ginger folks. Okay? That's what woke means now. Woke does not mean caring about people. That is not what it means. That's why they try to say that it means, but that's not what it means. So where am I going next? You know where I'm going next. There's only one place I could end this on to demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about. You know where I'm going. I'm going right here. Starfleet Academy. Starfleet Academy, where they have a neurodivergent hologram who swims and breathes, where they have a gay Klingon, Klingons in skirts, where they have most of their stories. Now, I know this because I've watched some of my favorite reviewers talk about it, not because I watch this show, because I don't. Okay? Because I do not watch this show. But, I mean, Kurtzman is doing everything he can, everything he possibly can to anger and chase away traditional historical fans of Star Trek, because everything about this show is literally spitting in the face of all Star Trek history, because Star Trek has always been diverse. Always. But it's not about that now, just like Doctor Who is not. You see that? So that's what I mean when I say, if you're going to use a word like diversity and representation and inclusion, use them honestly with integrity. Don't twist them to mean something that they don't actually mean, something that's never been true. Okay? So let me pull up another tweet, and then I'm going to put your comments on the screen. Now, one of the first signalings of gatekeeping that other people were accused of was this famous quote by Brie Larson. I don't need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him, and she did it with the neck roll, what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him. I want to know what it meant to women of color, biracial women, to teen women of color. Brie Larson said that. Okay? So while other people were accused of gatekeeping, she got on the mic and said she don't care what 40-year-old white dudes think about A Wrinkle in Time because it wasn't made for them. Okay? I mean, and so I don't understand how the very people that decried gatekeeping are now gatekeeping. Don't get it. So let me finish with this tweet of mine, and then I'll put your comments on the screen. The same thing that happened to all our other franchises. The question was down here, Star Wars Timeline Ben, we used to be a proper country. Can you explain to me what happened to Star Trek? Okay. My response was the same thing that happened to all our other franchises. They listened to people that were never a part of fandom telling them something that had worked for decades was wrong, and that they were sexist and racist and phobic and bigots if they didn't change it to accommodate them. So they let them take it over, and with great glee, They proceeded to destroy everything that actual fans like, just out of spite. And then I talked about this meme. I have more of the thing you like. Yay, fans love it. I do not like the thing. You're a bad person if you do not address the fact that I do not like the thing. I've made changes to the thing. Fans not happy. Well, you buy the thing. He said, nope, I never had any real interest in the thing. That's what happened. That's what happened to Star Trek and everything. Okay? That's what happened. Okay, now I'm going to put your comments on the screen. I think in hindsight, we should have kept harder, quite frankly. Let me tell you the future, because that is where we're going. What's going to happen is all these franchises are going to collapse, and they're going to become worthless, and they're going to be sold for peanuts. Some of them are going to go into public domain. Some of them are going to be sold for tenths of pennies on the dollar. You know what's going to happen after that? We're going to rebuild, because entertainment is not going to go away just because all these franchises got destroyed. What's going to happen, however, when they rebuild, is gatekeeping is going to be built in to the new wave of entertainment. It's going to be built in. Who knows if some of these are bots? I think some of them are. But some of them sound like people because bots sound a certain way. And some of them personal attacks feel a little bit too personal. It's no different from being a fan of a song but knowing nothing about the artist or the work. True. You can be a fan of a song but not an overall fan of the artist. Both can be true at the same time. Like when they say, oh, you're a fan, name 5 of their songs. This really isn't complicated. Okay. I think Greek mythology should count as superheroes, where so much of what American comics are is based on that, until sometimes you might be able to count that. Their foundation is the MCU or the DC shows, and suddenly they're experts and have never picked up a comic book. Right. That's what I've been talking about. Exactly what I've been talking about. Nothing more frustrating than someone saying they're a fan and you bring up something from the comics and they tell you they've never read them. Then there's nothing wrong with saying I'm a fan of this media. Nothing wrong with saying, well, I like the animation. Well, I like the live action movies. Well, I've only played the games. What's wrong with that? Nothing. But if you're saying that someone with more exposure to the content, that's true, that's factual as well, they will know some stuff that you don't know. And nobody's saying that you're not a fan. What we're saying is you should be honest about what you're actually a fan of. It's fine, don't get me wrong, but then don't tell me if a superhero movie is good. I'll be the judge of that. That's right. Because you get to decide what you like and don't like. That's why you hear me say that all the time. That's why I don't understand the idea that some people seem to have, that somehow they get to decide what other people think and feel, and they get to decide what other people like, not in this life or the next. Do you get to decide what other people think or feel? Okay. Did Bob Kane steal from Bill Finger? He did. He took the credit for what Bill Finger did for decades. Yes, he did. OG Batman looks like a cross between Alan Scott and the Black Bat from the Pulps. Very true. Very true. But the Batman that we know came from both Bill Finger's upgrades and updates and his tweaks. Batman Returns is objectively a horrible Batman movie from a fan's perspective, but it's a great Christmas movie. A lot of people like Batman Returns. I kind of feel like that. Maybe it's not a bad Christmas movie, but that's not a Batman movie. That movie was about schizophrenia and double-mindedness and living dual lives and just basically Tim Burton weirdness. They just used Batman as a backdrop. First movie was much more about Batman. Seems like everyone is a Batman expert depending on where you come into the character. Like David said, that version is the definitive version and all others be condemned. Now, I've talked about that before, what Eric said. What we call that is a jumping on point. What is your jumping on point? See, that is not wrong or bad. See, one of the reasons I feel that way, y'all hear me talk about it all the time, is because my father introduced me to a lot of stuff that was from his day. I could not see it like dad saw it because it wasn't the music of my time. I mean, but the artists were still around. I just didn't see it like they saw it. I was looking at what was, the pop culture ethic of my time. But my father introduced me to so much music from his day, and I still love that music to this day. But that was from his generation. See, that's not right or wrong, but I had a different jumping on point. Can you see that? That's what Rock is talking about. What's your jumping on points? There is no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with a jumping on point. But don't think if a character has been around for 80 years and you've been aware of them for the last 2 years, that you would have the same body of knowledge as someone that's been reading and studying and following the character most of their life, and you just found them. Okay? The Bale movies really made it worse, in my opinion. Yeah, a lot of people think that. But a lot of people think that about The Dark Knight Returns. They think that I had a tweet about that this week. Somebody said that the damage that The Dark Knight Returns did to Batman, he's never recovered from it. I personally don't agree with that. It's the greatest Batman story, my favorite one. But I understand the critics of it. What amazes me about that is that you can't write a story that doesn't pick a direction. The whole point of that's like saying you can have your body without your skeleton. Without your skeleton and your skull and your bones, it would just be, a sack of meat and your organs just hanging out there like a blob. You got to have structure to hang the meat and the organs on. Do you understand that? Same idea with a story. You got to tell a specific story. And so the people that are critical of it don't always seem to understand the difference between it was bad and I didn't like it, because that's not the same thing. I didn't like it is not synonymous with it was bad. I didn't like the fact that it had a great impact is not the same as it was bad. That's how I feel about Chris Reeve Superman. People that love Chris Reeve Superman get accused of saying we just want that over and over again. No, I don't. You're not going to duplicate that anyway. What I want is a good representation of Superman, and his was the best one. Okay? Not a duplicate of him. We don't need to keep that, but trying to replicate that. But a good representation of Superman is what I'm talking about. But we get accused of saying we want Reeve over and over again and nothing else, and that's just not true. But that's the accusation. I like to think of Batman as Buddhist. Well, like I said, the conversation lately has been, is he Catholic or Protestant? But I showed you from the comic panels, he's always prayed. He's always acknowledged God, and so did Grayson. So introducing religion of some kind into his mythology is actually not new. Maybe getting more specific with his particular denomination or perspective. Okay. Okay, Popcorn Fire says, yeah, I'm 100% for gatekeeping. That's what people are coming around to now. I told you, when all this stuff collapses and it gets rebuilt, gatekeeping is going to be built into the new stuff. You'll see. I know, whenever we tell the truth early, people lose their minds and call you names, but you'll see. I'm telling you now, write it down. When the new mode of entertainment, when the new franchises, when the new IP rises up from the ashes of all this stuff that's been destroyed, gatekeeping will be built in, because anybody that's alive and old enough to remember the age of woke is going to say, we ain't going through that again. We let them through the gate and they went scorched earth and violated everything. That's exactly right. Let them through the gate, they went scorched earth and destroyed everything that fans had loved for years. Ironically enough, there are creators that say their content isn't for straight men. That's right. Which has always amazed me. When you mean something one way, then what you're talking about is not based on justice or fairness or equality. You just mean it one way. If you think hating Black people should be condemned because that's racism, if other groups of people are hated, how is that not racism as well? If you have a group of people that you don't like just because they exist and you don't like it because of who they are, why is it racism when you hate a certain group, but it's not racism when you have that same kind of hatred for a different group? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't fight injustice. Don't misunderstand me. And I'm not saying that if we have laws that say we're supposed to be treated equally under the law, yes, we should fight for that. Of course we should. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I've always struggled to understand how when you say we hate this group of people because of who they are, okay, but then you say, them same people say, but we hate this group of people because of who they are. How is that different? How are you better? How is that better? Okay. But woke usually does circle back to just being racist or phobic or misogynists or bigots. Brie Larson, an actress who played She-Hulk, engaged in gatekeeping. That's right. I just showed you this. Where Brie Larson said, no, not that. Do I still have it up? Yeah, this. Where Brie Larson said she wasn't interested in what 40-year-old white dudes thought about A Wrinkle in Time. She wanted to hear from other groups of people. Okay, if she can say that, why can't other people say that? And yeah, She-Hulk, Tatiana Maslany, man, and Jessica Gao, the writer of She-Hulk, they made a point to talk about fans of the comics and sci-fi fantasy fans because the She-Hulk and the TV show wasn't anything like She-Hulk from the comic books on purpose, just to, as they said, own the chuds. Okay, you'll never see Michael Bay direct a Twilight movie, but it's totally okay for feminist activists to direct superhero movies in Star Wars. How can that be argued? If it's a movie that skews towards primarily a female fan base, most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, they'll try to get a woman to direct it. But if it's a male franchise with a male fan base, they say, oh, no. We have to let everything but men direct it. Please make that make sense to me. Okay, I'm sure the Trojan horse happened in some capacity, but yes, you're correct. Correct on the Trojan horse. Okay. Those last Indiana Jones movies are cringe. They really are. They should just build their own clubhouse because if they let in the boys, we just even build another one. The girls will abandon it altogether. Okay. So we then have to look at what we call the circle of diversity. We have to look at what happens when we do that. When we say, here it is. Okay. Let me pull this up so you can see it. This is what happens when we say that. Build your own clubhouse. This is what happens when we say that. We demand to be included in your space to make it more diverse and inclusive. This is the circle of diversity. We demand, once we let them in, we demand you change the space to our liking and ban stuff that offends us. The next is we demand you be kicked out of the space that we created since you offended us. Next up, laugh out loud. If you hate us, why not just make your own space and round and round we go. That's what happens. If we go the build your own route, that's what happens. Every time. Every time. So that's why the next time, when the next wave comes in, gatekeeping is going to be built in because of this mind game. That's why people that play these kind of mind games don't like me. You got to go find somebody with a weak mind. These mind games. It was working fine before you showed up. You demanded to be let in. Once you get in, you strip it of everything that made it work. And then laugh. And then say, well, if people don't like it, why don't they just go somewhere else? And they do, then you follow them there too. Okay? Xavier came in. That's a lesson Hollywood refuses to learn from this. That's right. No, what do I want? Yeah. That's a lesson Hollywood refuses to learn from this. That's right. That's right. Once they make changes to what was already working, it ruins it for the fan base. And I forgot to use this one because I've mainly been focusing on sci-fi and fantasy. That's mainly what I want to talk about today. But I got to pull this one up. You know what I'm finna say. You know which movie I'm finna pull up. Don't you? Yes, you do. Here it comes. Ha ha! Snow White 2025. Okay? Because Rachel Zegler proved to be a nightmare on the promotional circuit. She bashed the original movie. She bashed all the ideas in the movie. Snow White was literally the movie that made Walt Disney. Walt had to spend all the money he had. Everyone told him not to do it. Everyone told him it was going to destroy him. And it was such a hit. Snow White was such a hit in 1937 until that's what built the Walt Disney Company. And Rachel Zegler comes out bashing it from the jump. No longer 1937. It's written 1937, very evidently so. She's not going to be saved by the prince. It's not about true love's kiss. It's about her becoming the leader she knows she can be. That ain't what Snow White is about. But that's what they made it about. And what happened? We just got a report that said they lost anywhere from $170 million to $300 million on this movie. And Rachel Zegler has torched her Hollywood career. That girl got plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg, if you don't know her backstory. She was Marie in West Side Story. Then she got this. She was in the lane to become the next it girl, if you didn't know that. Rachel Zegler was in the lane to become the next it girl. And all she had to do, because like Jennifer Lawrence was a it girl for a while, and Alicia Vikander was a it girl for a while. Millie Bobby Brown was a it girl for a while. Sydney Sweeney has been a it girl for a while. Girls that just end up in all the movies. Zendaya has been the it girl for a while. Rachel Zegler was in the lane to be that. And all she ever had to do was shut up. And if that girl had just shut up and got out there and said, I'm having so much fun playing Snow White, I feel like it's an honor to be the first Disney princess. I feel like it's an honor to star in a story that actually built Walt Disney. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity. If she didn't want to say all that, all she could have said was, man, I'm loving playing Snow White. And then shut up. She would have been the next it girl. Handpicked by Steven Spielberg? Are you kidding me? But what did she do? Oh, okay. So stopped after the fourth film. That one was all right. I'm sure you're talking about Indy. But I haven't watched anything Indy since after, wait a minute. Did I watch anything after Crystal Skull? I think maybe I did, but I think Indiana Jones' Adventure should be him as a young man. I don't really like him following when he gets older. That's just me. Why isn't the Predator eating her? Because she was an android. But yeah, Predator went from skinning men alive and hanging their wet, bloody corpses upside down as trophies to talk about their feelings and being sensitive. I don't watch the new one either, but that's my initial reaction to that image. That's right. Drinker already covered it, so I'm good. Made me ponder what were they thinking when pitching this. That's right. So sometimes I don't watch these movies because I'm not spending my time, energy, and definitely not my money on them. But sometimes I do watch my favorite reviewers talk about them. And just the detail that's in the reviews, like I know, no, I'm not watching that like ever. When it come on TV for free, when it come on streaming, a streaming service I'm paying for, I still ain't watching it then. Some of these movies have come on streaming services. I ain't watching Snow White. I am never watching Butt Kick Man again. I told y'all that. I am never watching Shmon's Superman again in this life. I ain't never watching Butt Kick Man again. And I'm going to watch Supergirl because I want to see Millie in the role. I'm never watching Butt Kick Man again. So, okay. Popcorn says, oh, no, not the Star Wars sequels. It's cool, though, because they're not canon. I think that's where we're going. If they really ever wanted to restore anything Star Wars, although I really think it's too late, to be honest with you. But if they ever wanted to make a move that would make a quantum difference after the Kathleen Kennedy era, it would be to decanonize the sequels, which was nothing but J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, Ryan Johnson, I know how to say his name, Rian Johnson spitting in the face of fans. They need to decanonize that. And you never make me accept that they are. That's right. Ryan Johnson fan fiction is what I see. That's right. They fired him. Yes, they did. Off of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Yes, they did. They had the representative from the Tolkien estate there to make sure there was fidelity to the books, and they fired him. Once they fired him, what did they do? Girl bosses and diversity and everything except who the characters would be. But yes, they did fire them. I don't know why they specify straight white men. It's not like straight brothers will line up down the block to see these things either. I have said many times that human beings, unfortunately, one of our weaknesses as humans is that we have this all or nothing mentality. I know people are racist. I know people are sexist. Not everybody, but I know some people hate other humans. I get that. I understand that. I understand that. I mean, if I told you some stories from my life, some of the things I've been through just because I'm Black, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Some of the stories from my life, if I told you, you would not believe me. So I know that. I know that. What I also know is that whatever faults and flaws Stan Lee might have had, we wouldn't have what we have if it wasn't for Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and Bill Finger and Carmine Infantino and Gardner Fox and Otto Binder and C.C. Beck. We wouldn't have any of what we have in Jack Kirby. We wouldn't have. Also got to throw Dwayne McDuffie in there, though, not a white man. But we wouldn't have what we have without those men. I know people aren't perfect. I know Ike Perlmutter was racist and didn't like women. And I know Ike Perlmutter tried to get Robert Downey Jr. cut out of Captain America Civil War to save money because he didn't want to pay him that salary. I know that. I know that. I know that people are all or nothing. That has been part of the fallout of cancel culture, which is why I knew it was some garbage as soon as it came on the scene. Cancel culture meaning that if you've ever said or done anything wrong in your life, or if you've ever said or done anything that wasn't politically correct, or if you've ever said or done anything that certain people just didn't like, then your whole life has to be canceled. And you can't work anymore. That's what happened to Joss Whedon. And I'm not saying Joss Whedon didn't have anything coming for being abusive. I'm saying you can't work anymore. So they take away your livelihood. You have to go do something else, and they destroy your reputation. That's where cancel culture comes from. So you said something in a tweet, however many years ago, and now all of a sudden. So I'm not saying that you don't have to be accountable for your actions. And I'm not saying that choices don't come with consequences. I'm saying that cancel culture is an extreme. So even when I look at the comic book greats of the past, I know those men weren't perfect. I know some of those men were racist. I know that. I also know that we wouldn't have what we have without them. We wouldn't have Black Panther. We wouldn't have Falcon. We wouldn't have Jon Stewart. We wouldn't have them without those same men. I know that. But one of our weaknesses as the human race is being all or nothing. They got rid of Ike Perlmutter and gave it all to Feige. And what happened? What happened as soon as he tried to shoehorn Captain Marvel and everything? What happened? What happened as soon as we hit WandaVision? What happened? WandaVision all the way through the current Wonder Man. What happened? Obscure characters, bad stories, diversity, inclusion, stuff that didn't nobody care about. Phase 5 and 6 just being a total failure. So much so until they've had to spend hundreds of millions to bring back the original characters to try to make Avengers Doomsday work. That don't tell you nothing. I'm just saying, all or nothing is a weakness. That because this person has done this wrong, we have to throw out everything. Now, let me hasten to say, because I know somebody's going to bring up Neil Gaiman. Let me hasten to say that concept also has to be applied to taste. Because I agree that there are some things you can't just get past. I agree. What I'm saying is those things that you just can't get past are different for different people. So some of the things I read about Neil Gaiman, if he actually did that stuff, then So I'm understanding why sometimes we can't separate art from artists. But I'm saying also in that same breath, it must be acknowledged that we wouldn't have certain creative IPs if it weren't for the people that created them. And many of those people were straight white men. Okay? Look what they tried to do to Blade. For those of you that don't know what they tried to do to Blade, one of the reasons they've had such a hard time mounting this Blade movie with Ali has been because they keep writing a story where they replace Blade with his daughter. They keep writing a girl boss to replace Blade, that's why. And that is no longer working. People have had enough. People are up to here with the girl boss. Up to their teeth, up to the eyeballs, whatever allegory idiom you want to use, people have had enough. People have had enough with girl boss characters coming in and replacing male characters. And the funniest thing about girl boss characters is that women don't like them either. We're talking about half the planet. If girl boss characters had a mass appeal, then at least half the planet would like them. Then why are all these franchises tanking? It's because women don't like them either. So people have had it with girl boss characters. So with the Blade franchise, they kept writing a story where his daughter would replace him. And don't nobody want to see that. What they should have done was brought Wesley Snipes back for one final adventure. You know, Blade, the final story, and do like a Dark Knight Returns where he has the last Blade story. And if he goes out saving the world. And the next time a new strain of vampires is invented or whatever. If they had done that, that would have made bank. Everybody would want to see that. Okay. Their warnings about Snow White came true. They were just 80 years too early. Exactly right. Whenever you tell the truth too soon, that's when you get all the criticism and the backlash, and you're gatekeeping and you're just a hater. And I see that all the time on Twitter. You know, all they do on YouTube is hate. That's not true. People have accused me of that. And I'm like, that's not true. I talk about stuff I love all the time. That's why, once again, I refuse to engage with that level of ignorance and stupidity. And if you think that makes me arrogant, then you're welcome to think that. I refuse to engage with that level of ignorance and stupidity where you obviously don't read my timeline. And then you come on my timeline trying to tell me off, trying to call me names, trying to curse me out, and you think I have to listen to that. I don't, and I won't. I talk about the stuff I love all the time. And everybody that follows me knows what I love. Batman, Captain Marvel, not that stupid New 52 Shazam, actual Captain Marvel. I love him. Elektra. I'm talking about Marvel's Elektra, not the Jennifer Garner movie. I'm talking about the character, Frank Miller's character. I love Elektra. Perez's and Wolfman's Teen Titans. I love them. And the Teen Titans cartoon. Love it. Okay, Justice League Unlimited. I love it. I said recently I just thought Superman and Martian Manhunter were too nerfed when I show otherwise. So I talk about the stuff I love all the time. Aliens, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, but all the original Star Trek movies. I've even changed my mind on Star Trek III, Search for Spock. I still agree that it's anticlimactic, but when I looked at it again recently, I realized there are so many great moments in that movie. It just kind of ends kind of on a thud. See what I mean? So I talk about stuff I love all the time. And I talk about stuff I've changed my mind on. I talk about stuff that I ain't going to never change my mind on. Like Butt Kick Man, you ain't going to never change my mind on that. That is garbage from beginning to end. And when we tell the truth, and when we tell the truth too soon, that's when the people come, because the shills want to come to make you go see the movie, and they're paid to praise it. And people don't understand, when you say that everything is good, that means nothing is good. When you say you like everything, that means your opinion don't matter. Because nobody like everything. But when you're paid for your opinion is worthless. Okay? She just had to be humble. Talk about Rachel Zegler, that's right. That Snow White actress lecturing people on what happened back then. She didn't have anything to stand on, that she didn't grow up back then. Know your role and just perform the character. If that was a tweet, I would make it a no lies detected tweet. I see no lies. Somebody that's 20 years old, somebody born this century, talking about times of the late 30s. What would you know about the late 30s? This is why I listened to my father and my grandparents, so they could teach me something, so they could educate me about a time I did not live in. What would I know about a time I didn't live in? Okay? She didn't have anything to stand on, and she didn't grow up back then. That's right. Know your role and just perform the character. There it go. No lies detected. Know your role and just perform the character. All she had to do to be sitting pretty right now was shut up. Brie Larson learned her lesson. I don't know if she's ever going to come back, though. I haven't really seen her in any major Hollywood productions. Brie Larson learned how to shut up, but I might be too little too late. But Zegler, why would you ever want to put her on a promo tour for your picture knowing what she's going to do? That girl shot herself in the foot, and she's just in her 20s. She's still very, very young. I think she's going to make it in theater. She seems to be really, really good in theater. I think that's going to be her bread and butter from now on, and probably where she should stay. I recently finished watching the original Snow White and the Grimm Brothers version months ago. Not surprised on how much money was lost, a harsh but necessary lesson. If you've ever studied those German and those Eastern European fairy tales, man, they were gruesome. You need to go back and read the original ones, man. They're not. The stuff you know is Disney-fied. The stuff you know has the teeth taken out of it so kids can watch it. Read them original tales. They was ugly. This is what I'm talking about. The difference between someone who's actually studied the subject, someone that actually read more of the material, because all the stuff that people think of is actually Disney stuff. That's not the original stories. The Brothers Grimm stories, all that, Hansel and Gretel, stuff you think about is Disney-fied. It's Disney stuff. It's not the actual stuff. No, it's not. You'd be surprised. Quick shout out to YouTuber Mara Jade on chat reviews. Knows what I mean for suggesting that version of me. Cool. I'm trying to think, do I know Mara Jade? I know. Maybe I'm thinking about Vera. I know her. I think I know who Mara Jade is. These are guys that prove to be unable to understand women and their mindset and vice versa. One example is Tom King, his comic book fans have pointed out with the latest Supergirl. You don't know her. Just because you want Clara to be this this drunk, party girl, irreverent, disrespectful. That's not who Kara Zor-El is. She looks up to Superman. She's always tried to live up to his example. She has gotten frustrated at times where she feels like she's failed. But just because you want her to be some kind of drunken party girl, that's not who Supergirl is. And I have predicted it in my videos. I have told you, when the families, when the Marges and you know, the family, the women with the small daughters, when they go to watch this movie, they're going to be like, what is this? They're going to be asking, is that the kind of example we want to set with Supergirl? You'll see. To quote the villain syndrome from The Incredibles, when everyone is super, no one is. That's it exactly. Incredibles movie is still the best Fantastic Four movie we ever got. Why can't they do the Fantastic Four right? I talked about this. Because they don't understand them. They don't understand what they are. See, you have to understand what the hook of a character is. The hook of the Fantastic Four now is not their powers. Because we've had superpowers for decades now. That's not the hook. That's not how you frame that group to make them interesting. And nobody seems to get that because the hook is not their powers. But anyway, that's it for me today. I got some other phone calls coming in I need to get to, and I got my other jobs I need to do for today, but I wanted to come on and do my live stream. Ooh, wait, let me put this up. Actually told some of the members are critical of some of my thoughts when comparing Snyder and Gunn on Kal-El in the films and what was done well and what isn't. Right, because either you get Superman or you don't. You get what Superman is about, what he has come to mean, or you don't. And every time you don't, that shows up very, very painfully and obviously in the content that you don't get him. Okay? That's it for me this week. I'm still reviewing all your feedback on Ashley because I told you I got to get my views up. I've got to make my channel blow up. So I'm still looking at your feedback because I want to keep doing this. I gotta get my views to where they need to be. So I'm still reviewing all that. So I want to say thank you for that. So thanks to everybody that watched me live. Please give me a thumbs up. Please like and share the video. Please subscribe to my channel. I come on every Friday at 10 o'clock a.m. to talk about what caught my attention in comic book fandom for the week. So that's it for me today. DT2 Comics Chat out.